I used to believe work was a place you went to prove your worth, a chair you occupied long enough to justify your salary, a ritual of showing up even when nothing meaningful happened. That belief was beaten into me early by offices that valued presence over progress and hierarchy over honesty. When I started my first startup, I didn't intend to redefine work. I just couldn't afford the old version of it. I couldn't pay people to look busy. I needed outcomes. And that necessity cracked open a truth most companies still avoid. The future of work didn't start with remote tools or flexible hours. It started with startups refusing to carry dead weight, including outdated ideas about control. Traditional employment was built for predictability. Fixed hours, fixed roles, fixed paths. That made sense when markets moved slowly and information was scarce. But startups live in permanent uncertainty. Plans expire weekly. Job descriptions rot faster than org charts can be updated. In that environment, hiring someone for a role instead of a problem is a liability. The earliest shift I saw wasn't remote work, it was trust. We hired people we couldn't see to do things we couldn't fully define yet, and judged them not by time spent, but by momentum created. That was not a cultural experiment. It was survival. What startups unintentionally exposed is that most people don't hate work, they hate pointless work. When you strip away unnecessary meetings, approval chains, and performative productivity, something interesting happens. People take ownership. They manage their energy instead of their hours. They solve problems instead of protecting territory. This terrified traditional managers because it removed their primary lever oversight. But for startups, oversight was too expensive. Every layer slowed learning. So autonomy wasn't a perk, it was a requirement. The rise of remote work didn't create this shift, it revealed it. Tools like Slack, Zoom, and Notion didn't free workers. They exposed how much of the old office was built around surveillance, disguised as culture. Startups adopted remote and hybrid models, not because they were progressive, but because talent was global and offices were optional. When you can hire the best person, regardless of location, geography stops being a moat and starts being friction. That realization permanently altered the employment contract. Work became something you do not, somewhere you go. But here's the uncomfortable part no one likes to say out loud. The future of work is not softer, it's sharper. Startups removed layers of bureaucracy, but they also removed hiding places. When outcomes matter more than hours, underperformance is harder to disguise. When flexibility increases, accountability tightens. Many people celebrate freedom without acknowledging the responsibility it demands. Not everyone wants to manage themselves. Not everyone thrives without structure imposed from above. The startup version of work rewards self-direction brutally and punishes passivity quietly. Another shift startups forced was the unbundling of employment itself. Full-time jobs are no longer the default unit of contribution. Freelancers, contractors, fractional executives, and project-based teams became normal, not because startups wanted to avoid commitment, but because expertise became more valuable than loyalty. When speed matters, you don't need someone forever, you need them right now, at their best. This redefinition unsettled workers trained to equate stability with virtue. But it also unlocked a generation of people who wanted control over their time income streams and identity beyond a single employer. The old promise of work was security in exchange for obedience. Startups couldn't offer that. They offered something else instead: leverage in exchange for risk, equity instead of tenure, impact instead of titles, learning instead of ladders. This bargain is volatile. Some people win big, many don't. But it fundamentally changed how younger workers evaluate jobs. They no longer ask only how much does it pay. They ask, what will this turn me into? That question scares companies still clinging to retention through inertia. What surprised me most was how this shift exposed leadership weakness. Managing outcomes requires clarity. You can't hide behind policies. You have to articulate priorities, make trade-offs visible, and accept blame when direction is wrong. In traditional systems, managers manage people. In startups, leaders manage ambiguity. That's a much rarer skill. Many founders failed not because they lacked vision, but because they couldn't translate that vision into autonomous action without micromanaging or disappearing entirely. As startups continue to redefine employment, attention grows sharper. Flexibility versus burnout, autonomy versus isolation, speed versus sustainability. The same tools that free people also erase boundaries. The same cultures that empower also demand more. The future of work is not automatically humane. It reflects the values of those designing it. Startups that ignore this create environments that extract energy under the banner of passion. Startups that take it seriously build systems where trust rests and accountability coexist, though never perfectly. And this is where the story tightens, because once you remove the old structures of work, you inherit a new responsibility to consciously design what replaces them, and that responsibility collides head-on with growth, pressure, investor expectations, and human limits. And the sentence does not end here, because it carries directly into what happens next, when freedom at work starts producing unintended consequences, and founders must decide whether they are building a future people can sustain or just a faster way to burn through them, and whether you are building something sustainable or just a faster machine to exhaust people becomes impossible to ignore. Once the first signs show up, missed deadlines, not from laziness, but from overload, sharp contributors going quiet, enthusiasm replaced by endurance. And this is where many founders confront a truth. They didn't plan for removing. Old structures doesn't eliminate human limits, it just exposes them faster. I watched this play out inside my own company. We had done everything right by modern standards. Remote first, flexible hours, no rigid hierarchies, high autonomy. On paper, it was the future of work. In reality, some people were thriving, while others were quietly drowning. Not because they were less talented, but because ambiguity is heavier than structure for many minds. When there is no clear stop time, work expands. When ownership is shared, responsibility can blur. Freedom without guardrails doesn't feel like trust. It feels like pressure to always be on. This is the part of the future of work startups rarely talk about publicly. Autonomy scales only when clarity scales with it. You cannot remove rules and replace them with vibes. You have to design new systems just as intentionally as the old one's systems for decision-making feedback, rest conflict, and growth. The difference is that these systems are invisible unless something breaks, and by the time it breaks, the cost is usually human. The startups that mature through this phase stop fetishizing flexibility and start engineering sustainability. They define what good work looks like. They make priorities painfully explicit. They protect focus as aggressively as they protect speed. They normalize rest not as a perk, but as a requirement for long-term performance. This is not softness, it's realism. Burned-out teams don't innovate. They survive barely until they don't. Another shift happens here that separates enduring companies from chaotic ones. Leadership stops being about inspiration and becomes about containment. You contain scope. You contain urgency. You contain chaos so it doesn't leak into every hour of everyone's life. That is hard for founders who built their identity around intensity. But intensity is not a strategy. It's a phase. And companies that mistake it for culture eventually collapse under it. The future of work as startups are redefining it is not about unlimited freedom. It's about conscious trade-offs, flexibility with accountability, autonomy with alignment, speed with recovery. The old world failed by over-controlling people. The new world fails when it underprotects them. The companies that get it right accept that work is not life even when it's meaningful, and that people who are allowed to be human show up stronger, not weaker. What gives me cautious optimism is that startups learn faster than institutions. They feel pain earlier. They see consequences sooner. Many are already iterating on the future of work the same way they iterate on products, testing 4-day weeks, clearer ownership models, asynchronous norms, mental health boundaries, not because it sounds good on LinkedIn, but because attrition and burnout are expensive and trust is fragile. In the end, the future of work will not be decided by tools or trends. It will be decided by thousands of small founder choices about how pressure is distributed, how success is defined, and how people are treated when the numbers don't go their way. Startups are not automatically better employers. They are just more exposed. Their cultures are harder to hide behind, and that visibility is both a risk and an opportunity. If you're building a company right now, understand that redefining work means accepting responsibility for lives, not just output. The systems you design will shape how people think, rest, and grow long after they leave your payroll. That's not something you can delegate or ignore. And if this reflection resonates, leave a comment and share what version of work you're trying to build or escape from, and subscribe if you want more honest conversations about startups beyond tactics and trends, because the real future of work is being written quietly every day by founders who decide whether speed is worth the human cost.